There is a secret that the ancient mystics understood and the modern world has nearly forgotten. It is not a secret about what you should do, or how hard you should work, or what strategies you should employ. It is a secret about what you are, about the nature of the force that moves through you and through all things, about why some people seem to attract abundance, peace, and purpose without strain, while others exhaust themselves chasing the same things and never quite reaching them. This secret has been whispered in mountain temples, encoded in the parables of sacred texts, and carried forward by those rare individuals who understood that the deepest truths are not argued into existence, but lived into being. The reason you are told to keep your mouth shut once you know it is simple. It cannot be given to another person through speech. It can only be recognized in the silence by the one who is ready. Every chapter ahead takes you deeper into this recognition. You will learn why the universe responds to what you are rather than what you want. You will understand the sacred role of silence in genuine transformation. You will discover how frequency, surrender, and alignment work together to reshape the reality you experience. And you will find, somewhere in these pages, the specific recognition that this moment has been preparing you to receive. If you're enjoying this audiobook and want to align with the deeper laws that govern abundance, peace, and spiritual awakening, subscribe to this channel now. More chapters are coming, and each one will bring you closer to the ancient secret that transforms not what you do, but who you are. Chapter 1. The whisper before the awakening. Before every genuine awakening, there is a whisper, not a dramatic revelation delivered in thunder and light, not a message that arrives with the certainty of something obviously significant. A whisper, quiet enough to miss if the noise of ordinary life is loud enough, persistent enough to return, again and again, until something in you finally grows still enough to hear it. The whisper takes different forms for different people. For some, it arrives as a restlessness that no achievement manages to satisfy. For others, it comes in the middle of a night when everything seems fine on the surface, and yet something ancient inside refuses to accept that fine is the whole story. For still others, it arrives as a single sentence read in a book, or a single moment of unexpected stillness in an otherwise relentless day that cracks the ordinary open, just enough to reveal something shimmering beneath it. The whisper is always the same message, wearing different clothes. It says there is something you have not yet understood about the nature of what you are. The ancient Indian village of Vrindavan carried a tradition older than its oldest written records. The elders there did not teach the young through lectures or arguments. They taught through something they called the transmission of presence. A student would sit near the teacher, not to receive information, but to receive something subtler. The quality of awareness the teacher inhabited would, through proximity and genuine openness, begin to resonate in the student. The student's inner landscape would shift, not because they had been told something, but because they had been near someone. This tradition understood what modern psychology is only beginning to articulate through the language of mirror neurons and emotional contagion. That consciousness is contagious. That the quality of one person's inner life actually moves across the space between people and enters another. And that genuine transformation happens through resonance rather than through instruction. The source law which this audiobook explores across its 12 chapters, is not a law in the sense of a rule imposed from outside. It is a law in the sense that gravity is a law, a description of how things actually are, rather than how someone decided they should be. The law states that life responds not to your desires, but to your essence, not to what you want, but to what you are, not to the surface of your intentions, but to the depth of your being. This is why two people can want identical things with equal intensity and have entirely different experiences in relation to those things. The wanting is the same. The essence broadcasting beneath the wanting is different, and the universe, which does not read words or intentions, but reads something more fundamental than either, responds to the essence with the faithfulness of a mirror. The mirror metaphor is ancient. Rumi used it. The Upanishads described it. The Hermetic tradition encoded it in the phrase, as within, so without. But the metaphor does more than describe a correspondence between inner and outer. It carries a specific practical instruction embedded in its logic. You do not change the reflection by reaching into the mirror and rearranging what you see there. You change the reflection by changing what stands before the mirror. The person who understands this stops spending their primary energy trying to rearrange the outer world and begins instead the deeper and more consequential work of transforming the inner world that the outer one is faithfully reflecting. This is not passivity. It is the specific form of intelligent action that changes things at the level where they actually originate. The reason the secret, once known, is kept with the mouth shut is not because it is dangerous or because it should be hoarded. It is because the mouth is precisely the wrong vehicle for this particular transmission. Language, which is extraordinary for many purposes, is specifically inadequate for communicating the recognition this audiobook is aimed at producing. Every description of a direct experience reduces it. Every definition of something living and dynamic freezes it into something static. The mystics who received the deepest understanding of the source law understood that speaking it too quickly, too confidently, too verbosely was a reliable way of substituting the map for the territory, the description for the thing itself. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the specific medium in which the deepest communication occurs. There is a quality of listening that most people have never practiced, and that is the specific prerequisite for what this audiobook offers. It is not the listening that waits for the other speaker to finish so you can respond. It is not the listening that evaluates incoming information against existing knowledge to determine whether it fits or conflicts. It is the listening that becomes genuinely empty, genuinely receptive, genuinely available to receive something that may not fit any existing category and may require a new category to be created in you to hold it. This quality of listening is what the Buddhist tradition calls beginner's mind and what the Christian mystics called poverty of spirit. It is the specific inner posture in which genuine revelation becomes possible. And it is the inner posture this chapter is inviting you into as the foundation for everything that follows. In a small Sufi community in 13th century Persia, the master Rumi sat with his closest students, not in the hall where public teachings were given, but in a garden at twilight. He would not speak for long periods. When he spoke, it was rarely in the language of systematic explanation. It was in the language of image, of paradox, of story, that opened inward rather than explaining outward. His most devoted student, Hussam Chalabi, once asked him why he did not simply say what he knew directly. Rumi paused for what felt to Hussam like a very long time. Then he said something that became one of the cornerstones of the tradition they were building together. He said, "The ear that can hear what I know directly has not yet been created in you." The poetry is not a lesser version of the truth. It is the specific shape the truth must take to fit through the opening that currently exists. When the opening grows larger, less shape will be needed. The silence will carry it. What you are about to receive across the chapters of this audiobook is not information to be added to what you already know. It is something closer to what Rumi was describing in that garden. A transmission in the specific shape that the current opening requires. Some of it will land as intellectual understanding. Some of it will land as something you feel in the body before you can articulate it in the mind. Some of it will arrive as a recognition of something you knew before you knew it, something that was always there, and that these words are simply pointing you back toward. Each of these modes of reception is valid. Each of them is part of the awakening that the whisper has been preparing you for. The only thing required of you is the specific quality of genuine openness to receive what arrives in whatever form it takes. Chapter 2. The Sacred Veil Between Knowing and Not Knowing. Every culture that has ever engaged seriously with questions of ultimate reality has described a veil, something thin but somehow impenetrable, that separates ordinary perception from a deeper or higher or more genuine vision of what is actually real. The Hindus called it Maya. The Platonic tradition called it the cave. The Christian mystics described it as the cloud of unknowing. The Sufi poets described veils of light so bright they blinded the ordinary eye while illuminating something in the deeper eye that most people had not yet opened. These are not simply poetic decorations applied to a prosaic philosophical point. They are precise phenomenological descriptions of a genuine aspect of human experience. That the ordinary mind, operating from its habitual categories and habitual assumptions, does not see reality as it is, but sees it through a lens so familiar it no longer registers as a lens. The veil is not something imposed on us from outside. It is not a punishment or a cosmic conspiracy to keep human beings in ignorance. It is the specific and somewhat paradoxical consequence of the mind's greatest strength, its capacity for pattern recognition and prediction. The mind that can recognize patterns and predict outcomes from incomplete information is extraordinarily useful for navigating a complex world. The same mind, when it applies its pattern recognition and prediction machinery to the question of what reality fundamentally is, generates answers that are efficient but not accurate, familiar but not true, comfortable but not liberating. The veil is made of the mind's own useful habits, turned toward a question they cannot actually answer. The ancient Egyptian mystery schools understood this dynamic and built their entire curriculum around the specific process of veil removal. The initiate did not enter the school to receive information unavailable to ordinary people. The information was largely available in the cultural and religious life of the surrounding society. The initiate entered to undergo a series of carefully designed experiences that would interrupt the mind's habitual pattern recognition long enough for something else to look through. The experiences were disorienting by design. They created the specific quality of genuine not knowing that the tradition identified as the prerequisite for genuine knowing. The message was clear. You cannot see what is real, while you are busy seeing what is familiar. The familiar must be genuinely disrupted before the real can genuinely appear. Sacred silence is the most universally prescribed method for genuine veil thinning across every tradition that has addressed this question seriously. Not the silence of an empty room, or the silence of someone who has simply stopped making noise. The silence of a mind that has genuinely, if temporarily, released its grip on its own continuous commentary. The silence in which the mind stops being the narrator of experience and becomes simply the witness of it. The silence in which what is known through categories and concepts steps aside enough to allow what might be known more directly to have its moment. This is not a common experience in the ordinary course of modern life, which is organized almost entirely around the generation and consumption of content, stimulus, information, and response. But it is an available experience in the brief, genuine pauses that every life contains, if something in us is watching for it. The specific role of silence in the source law is not ornamental. The law itself, the deep truth that life responds to what you are rather than what you want, cannot be genuinely received by a mind that is constantly generating the noise of its own wanting. The wanting is the very thing the veil is made of. Not because desire is bad or wrong, but because the specific energy of directed wanting creates a particular quality of inner static that interferes with the deeper signal of genuine being. The mystic who says silence before God is not recommending literal speechlessness as a spiritual virtue. They are pointing to the specific practice of quieting the wanting mind long enough for the being self to become audible. The being self has always been broadcasting. The wanting mind has simply been too loud to hear it. There is a story told in several different forms across multiple contemplative traditions about a student who came to a master asking for the secret of enlightenment. The master invited the student to tea. As the master poured, the student began talking about everything they already knew, everything they had studied, all the paths they had already walked. The master kept pouring. The tea overflowed the cup and ran across the table and onto the floor. The student finally noticed and cried out that the cup was full. The master set down the teapot. "You are like this cup," the master said. "You are so full of what you already know that there is no room for what I might offer. Come back when you are empty." The student left confused. Some students in these stories never return. The ones who do return differently than they left. They return with a quality of genuine emptiness that makes them, for the first time, genuinely teachable. The ancient mind, which several esoteric traditions distinguish from the ordinary analytical mind, is not a higher or more sophisticated version of the same thinking process. It is a qualitatively different mode of knowing that operates through recognition, resonance, and direct perception rather than through the analytical sequence of information gathering, comparison, and conclusion. When the ancient mind is active, the person knows something without being able to fully account for how they know it. The knowing is immediate rather than derived, certain rather than provisional, embodied rather than merely cognitive. The contemplative traditions of every culture have been in the business of cultivating access to this mode of knowing for thousands of years. The veil they speak of removing is precisely the veil that the ordinary analytical mind creates over the ancient mind through its incessant activity. This chapter is not asking you to abandon your analytical intelligence. It has been the tool that navigated your life to this point, and it will continue to be invaluable for the practical details of daily existence. But this chapter is inviting you to recognize that the analytical intelligence, however sophisticated, is not the deepest or most complete instrument available to you. Behind it, beneath it, or perhaps more accurately, at a deeper level of the same awareness, there is something that does not analyze, but simply knows. Something that does not compare, but simply recognizes. Something that does not conclude, but simply is. The entire arc of this audiobook is aimed at helping you access that something more reliably, more completely, and more deliberately. The veil is thinner than it has ever felt, and the side of it you are moving toward is where the real story begins. Chapter 3. Surrender is not what you think it is. Surrender has one of the worst reputations in the vocabulary of personal development. It sounds like giving up. It sounds like passive acceptance of whatever happens to come along, an abdication of agency and will and the specific kind of directed effort that genuine achievement seems to require. In the culture of optimization, productivity, and relentless self-improvement, the word surrender sits awkwardly at best and is actively suspected at worst. But the surrender described across the mystical and contemplative traditions of the world is not the surrender of defeat. It is the surrender of the specific, exhausting struggle of the self against the current of a reality it has never fully understood. It is the ending of a war that was never winnable by the force that was waging it. And it produces not weakness, but the specific quality of power that has been blocked by the strain of the fighting. A Zen master in 11th century China was asked by a student what he did before his enlightenment. "I chopped wood and carried water," the master said. The student asked what he did after. "I chop wood and carry water," the master replied. The student was confused. If the enlightenment changed nothing about the activities, what had changed? "Everything," the master said. "Before, I chopped wood to get to the end of chopping wood. I carried water to get to the end of carrying water. I was always somewhere other than where I was, pushing towards the next moment rather than meeting this one. After, I chop wood. That is all. The wood and I are not separated by my resistance to the chopping. The water and I are not separated by my wish to be done with carrying. The activities are identical. The relationship to the activity is entirely different. That relationship is what surrender transforms. The source law operates through a specific paradox that confounds the ordinary mind. The more effort the ordinary self applies to achieving what it wants, the more the effort itself becomes the obstacle. This is not because effort is bad or because passivity is the answer. It is because effort applied from the level of the wanting self, the self that experiences itself as separate from the flow of reality, and therefore must strain to get things from it, generates a specific inner contraction that the universe responds to with a corresponding outer contraction. The effort radiates the frequency of struggle. The universe, which responds to frequency rather than to intention, reflects a struggle back. More effort, more struggle, more struggle, more effort. The loop is not broken by trying harder. It is broken by the specific quality of genuine surrender that releases the contraction and allows the natural flow to carry what the effort was exhaustingly seeking to drag. This is not a comfortable teaching for anyone raised in a culture that equates effort with virtue and outcome with worth. It does not fit the narrative of the self-made person who succeeded through sheer will. But the self-made narrative, examined honestly, usually reveals something the story does not advertise: that the person was in alignment with something larger than their personal effort, that the effort succeeded not because the will was strong enough, but because the will happened to be aligned in a direction where the current was already moving. The rare cases where extraordinary effort succeeded in the complete absence of this alignment are instructive precisely because of their rarity. They exist, but they are the exception. The rule, observed honestly across the full range of human experience, is that genuine sustainable success moves with something rather than against it. The practical gateway to genuine surrender is not the decision to stop trying. It is the specific practice of releasing the identification with the outcome. There is an important distinction between working towards something with genuine commitment and effort and working towards something while your sense of your own worth and your sense of the rightness of the universe depend on that specific thing happening in that specific way, on that specific timeline. The first is healthy directed action. The second is a form of hostage taking that contracts the inner field and distorts the signal being sent into the responsive universe. Genuine surrender releases the hostage. It says, I will work, I will move, I will engage with full genuine commitment, and I will release the demand that the outcome be exactly as I have prescribed, because I trust that what responds to my genuine aligned effort knows better than my contracted wanting mind what form the outcome should take. The Tao Te Ching, attributed to Lao Tzu and dating to approximately the 6th century BCE, is perhaps the most sustained exploration of surrender as creative power available in any written text. The concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, describes precisely this quality of engaged surrender. Wu Wei is not the absence of action. The Tao Te Ching does not counsel inactivity. Wu Wei is action that arises from genuine alignment with the nature of things rather than from the ego's demand that things be different from what they are. It is the farmer who works with the seasons rather than fighting them. It is the river that finds the path of least resistance, and through that path moves mountains. It is the specific intelligence that arises when the wanting mind steps back far enough for the deeper intelligence to step forward. Learning to recognize the difference between aligned action and contracted action in your own experience is one of the most practically consequential skills this audiobook can offer. Contracted action has a specific feeling: tight, urgent, anxious, driven by the fear of what will not happen, rather than the genuine pull toward what is genuinely calling. It exhausts. It generates a quality of inner weather that colors every hour with the specific gray of chronic striving. Aligned action, surrendered action, has a different quality entirely. It has ease beneath the effort. It has a quality of rightness, of moving with something rather than against something, even when the action itself is demanding and the work is genuinely hard. The athlete in flow knows this quality. The artist in genuine creative absorption knows it. The parent in genuine loving care for a child knows it. The question this Audiobook is raising is whether that quality can be cultivated as the baseline of a life, rather than remaining the occasional exception to the rule of chronic strain. Surrender, genuinely practiced, does not diminish you. It returns you to yourself. The self that was exhausted by the endless effort to force life into the shapes demanded by the wanting mind was not your full self. It was a contracted version, carrying the weight of every resistance, every demand, every insisted upon outcome. The self that emerges through genuine surrender is larger, not smaller, more present, not less engaged, more genuinely powerful, not less effective. This is the specific paradox at the heart of the source law, that the release of the demand for control is the gateway to the genuine influence that the demand for control was desperately seeking and never quite achieving. Chapter 4. The frequency of who you are. Beneath the thoughts you think, beneath the emotions you feel, beneath the identity you present to the world, and the identity you present to yourself in private, there is something that can be described as your frequency. Not in the loose, metaphorical sense in which the word frequency sometimes gets used in popular spirituality, but in the more precise sense that physics uses when it describes everything in existence as patterns of vibrating energy at specific rates. The human being is not an exception to this physical reality. Every cell in your body is in continuous electrochemical motion. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond your physical body. Your brain generates oscillating patterns of electrical activity that correspond in measurable ways to different states of consciousness. You are, at the most fundamental physical level, a dynamic, vibrating broadcasting system. And what you broadcast through this specific system is what the responsive universe receives and reflects. The HeartMath Institute's research on cardiac coherence, conducted across decades of carefully documented study, has produced findings that are simultaneously obvious to anyone who has ever sensed the emotional atmosphere of a room upon entering it, and startling to anyone who has assumed that inner life is a strictly private affair. The heart's electromagnetic field changes its specific pattern in response to different emotional states. The coherent field patterns produced by genuine positive emotional states, genuine care, genuine appreciation, genuine peace, are measurably different from the incoherent patterns produced by anxiety, resentment, and chronic stress. These different patterns are detectable by other people's nervous systems at close range, influencing their physiological states and their behavioral responses below the threshold of any deliberate communication. Your inner state is broadcasting. Whether you intend it or not, whether you are aware of it or not, the frequency you inhabit is reaching the world around you. The source law's teaching that life responds to the essence of who you are finds its most precise contemporary articulation in this understanding of electromagnetic frequency. The universe does not read your intentions. It reads your frequency. The person who intends abundance, while inhabiting the emotional frequency of scarcity, is broadcasting scarcity. The person who desires love, while inhabiting the frequency of defensive self-protection, is broadcasting defensiveness. The person who wants peace, while their inner life is dominated by chronic vigilance and chronic resistance, is broadcasting the equivalent of a storm frequency. In each case, the universe responds not to what is wanted, but to what is being broadcast. This is not punishment. It is the natural and inevitable operation of the law that everything vibrates and that similar frequencies resonate. The ancient Vedic understanding of vibrational reality, encoded in the concept of nada Brahma, the universe, as sound as the fundamental substance of all that is, understood thousands of years before modern physics could measure electromagnetic fields, that the deepest nature of existence is frequency. The sacred sounds used in Vedic ceremony were not merely symbols or mnemonics. They were understood to be specific frequencies that, when genuinely embodied in practice, would produce corresponding shifts in the practitioner's own frequency. This is why mantra practice, in the Vedic and Buddhist traditions, is not understood as a request addressed to an external deity, but as a specific frequency cultivation, the deliberate inhabiting of a particular vibrational state that then becomes the frequency from which the practitioner's experience of reality emerges. The practical question that arises from understanding frequency is the most important practical question this audiobook can help you sit with. What frequency are you actually inhabiting? Not what frequency you intend to inhabit, not what frequency you would inhabit if conditions were different, but the frequency that is genuinely present in your inner life across the ordinary hours of an ordinary day. What is the emotional baseline that underlies your thinking when you are not deliberately managing it? What is the quality of inner weather that characterizes your experience of being alive on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon? What is the ambient feeling tone of your relationship with money, with other people, with your own future, with the possibility that what you most genuinely want might actually be available to you? These are the questions that reveal the actual frequency, as opposed to the intended one. Changing your frequency is not the same as performing a different emotional state. The universe, which reads frequency rather than intention, is not deceived by performed positivity or manufactured enthusiasm. It reads the frequency beneath the performance with a precision that no amount of surface presentation can fool. Genuine frequency change requires the specific kind of genuine inner work this audiobook describes: the sustained, patient, honest engagement with the inner architecture that has been generating the current frequency, and the deliberate, consistent introduction of genuinely different inner experiences through the practices of genuine gratitude, genuine surrender, genuine presence, and genuine alignment with what is most fundamentally true about the nature of who you are. There is a specific frequency that the ancient traditions consistently describe as the natural resting frequency of the aware human being who has genuinely arrived in their own experience. The Buddhists call it equanimity. The Christian mystics call it peace that passes understanding. The Taoists call it the stillness at the center of motion. The Sufi poets describe it as the ocean beneath the waves. These descriptions, arising from entirely different cultural and philosophical contexts, converge on the same essential quality: a fundamental okayness, a groundedness, a specific sense of rightness with what is that does not depend on any particular outer circumstance being present or absent. This frequency, which is not the frequency of excitement or of dramatic spiritual experience, but of genuine settled aliveness, is the specific frequency from which the source law most powerfully operates. The secret that is kept with a shut mouth is not a piece of information about frequency. It is the frequency itself. You cannot transmit it through words, because words operate at the semantic level, and frequency operates at a deeper level than semantics. What you can transmit through words is a series of carefully shaped descriptions that, if received with genuine openness, in a person of genuine readiness, create the specific conditions in which the frequency begins to be recognized and inhabited directly. That is what this audiobook is doing. Not telling you the secret. Creating the conditions in which you might recognize something you already are. Chapter 5. What the mystics knew about silence and power. The greatest power moves in silence. This has been understood by every serious contemplative tradition in human history, and it has been consistently misunderstood by the cultures that inherited those traditions at a distance. The misunderstanding takes a predictable form. Silence is interpreted as the absence of something, as a passive state, as a gap between activities, rather than as an activity with its own specific and extraordinary power. The mystical understanding is precisely the opposite. Silence, in the tradition that this audiobook draws from, is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something so complete, so full, so saturated with genuine being, that ordinary sound becomes unnecessary. The contemplative who emerges from deep meditation or deep prayer is not emerging from nothing. They are emerging from something that words are inadequate to describe, but that leaves them changed in specific and observable ways. Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Christian mystic, whose teachings the Church found deeply unsettling for reasons that had everything to do with their direct challenge to institutional authority, and nothing to do with their actual content, described what he called the ground of the soul. The ground was not a place or a state to be achieved through technique. It was the deepest nature of the aware being, the level of consciousness where the human and the divine were not two things, but one thing recognized from different directions. Eckhart taught that access to this ground was through genuine inner silence, not the silence of an empty room, the silence of a mind that has genuinely set down every concept, every image, every formulation of what God or reality or truth might be, and has become genuinely empty and genuinely present to what that emptiness actually contains. The specific power that moves through genuine silence is the power of unmediated connection with the source law itself. When the mind is full of its own content, its own interpretations, its own preferences, its own continuous generation of narrative about what is happening and what it means and what should be done about it, the signal of the deeper law is present, but receives no attention. It is like trying to hear a whispered conversation in a room where multiple people are speaking at full volume. The whisper is there. The signal is always being transmitted. But the noise of the ordinary mind's activity drowns it out completely. The practice of genuine silence is the practice of turning the volume down on the ordinary mind's activity long enough for the whisper to become audible. What the mystics heard in that whisper changed them. What you will hear when the practice becomes genuine enough will change you. Silence has a specific relationship to the secret that gives this audiobook its title. The instruction to keep your mouth shut once you know the secret is not about secrecy in the ordinary sense. It is about the specific recognition that the knowing in question is a specific kind of knowing that is corrupted by translation into ordinary speech. The moment you try to put the deepest recognition into words, you have already reduced it. The words capture something and lose something simultaneously. The something captured may be genuinely valuable and genuinely shareable. The something lost is the living quality of the direct recognition itself, the specific felt sense of truth that makes the knowing transformative rather than merely informational. This is why the Tao Te Ching begins with the statement that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, not as a counsel of despair about language, as a precise instruction about the relationship between the living truth and the symbolic representations of it. The practice of deliberately cultivating genuine silence in daily life does not require extended retreats or monastic withdrawal, though both of those can be genuinely valuable. It requires the specific practice of creating brief, genuine, undistracted pauses within the ordinary structure of the ordinary day. The 2 minutes of genuine stillness before getting out of bed, in which nothing is done and nothing is thought toward any particular goal. The quality of presence while waiting in line or in traffic in which the habitual reaching for the phone is replaced by genuine, open, uncurated presence with whatever is immediately happening. The deliberate pause before responding in a charged conversation in which the habitual formulation of a response is briefly suspended in favor of genuine listening to what is actually being said and what is actually arising in the interior in response to it. These moments are not dramatic. They are the specific practice of silence as it is available within ordinary life. The Sufi practice of muraqabah, a form of meditation in which the practitioner holds a quality of watchful presence without directing the attention toward any specific object, is one of the most sophisticated contemplative technologies available for cultivating the specific quality of silence this chapter is describing. In muraqabah, the practitioner is not trying to stop thoughts. They are not trying to achieve any particular state. They are practicing the specific quality of watchful, non-grasping presence that allows whatever is arising in the field of awareness to arise, without either suppression or elaboration. The thoughts come, the sounds come, the emotions come. The practitioner watches them all with the specific quality of open, non-attached witnessing that the tradition identifies as the natural posture of the undivided self. Over time, this practice does not eliminate thought. It reveals the space in which thought arises, and in that space, the whisper of the deeper law becomes progressively more audible. Power in the spiritual traditions does not mean what it means in the ordinary social sense of the ability to force outcomes or command compliance. Power in the mystical sense means the specific capacity to align with the force that moves all things rather than struggling against it. The person aligned with this force does not need to push, because the current is carrying them. The words they speak in this alignment have a quality that is immediately recognizable to anyone with sufficient inner sensitivity, not because the words are more eloquent or more sophisticated, but because they carry the specific vibrational quality of someone who is speaking from genuine alignment rather than from the contracted wanting self. This is what the old stories mean when they describe certain teachers as having words that went directly to the heart. The words were not special. The silence from which they emerged was learning to protect your energy, which is one of the practical themes this audiobook carries through its teachings. begins with recognizing that every conversation in which you share what you are coming to know before the knowing has genuinely settled is a conversation in which something is dissipated, not because other people are malicious or because sharing is wrong, because the premature articulation of a genuine inner transformation tends to substitute the articulation for the transformation itself. The person who talks extensively about what they are becoming is spending energy that might otherwise go into the actual becoming. The silence is not withholding. It is conservation. It is the specific wisdom of the gardener who does not dig up the seeds every day to check whether they are growing. Chapter 6. Wealth as Frequency. The teaching. Nobody is giving. The conversation about wealth in most spiritual communities is uncomfortable, contradictory, and ultimately unhelpful. On one side are the traditions that treat material abundance as incompatible with genuine spiritual development, that associate poverty with virtue and wealth with corruption, that counsel the serious seeker to renounce material concern as a prerequisite for genuine inner growth. On the other side are the contemporary prosperity teachings that treat abundance as a simple function of positive thinking, as if the only thing standing between anyone and unlimited wealth is the content of their conscious thoughts. Both of these positions miss something essential. The teaching that this chapter offers is different from both, and it is the teaching that the title of this audiobook is most directly pointing toward. Wealth, genuine, sustainable abundance of any kind, is not a matter of what you do or what you think, but of what you are at the frequency level. And the frequency level is precisely what most teachers on this subject never address. The ancient Vedic concept of Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance and prosperity, was not, in its original context, a deity to be propitiated for financial gain. Lakshmi represented a specific quality of consciousness. She was described as Svayam Varishta, which means she who is naturally the most excellent. She was not associated with the striving for wealth, but with the specific inner quality from which genuine abundance naturally emerges. The temples dedicated to her were places where devotees came not to ask for money, but to cultivate the specific inner quality she represented. The quality of genuine appreciation, genuine openness, genuine hospitality to what life brings, and genuine generosity in what life allows one to offer. Abundance, in this understanding, is not something pursued. It is the specific outer expression of a specific inner quality. And cultivating the inner quality is the specific path to the outer expression. The frequency of genuine abundance has specific characteristics that are recognizable once you know what you are looking for. It is not the frequency of wanting. Wanting is organized around absence, around the gap between what is and what is desired. And the emotional texture of wanting carries the specific contraction of that gap. The frequency of genuine abundance is organized around presence, around the specific quality of genuine appreciation for what genuinely is, around the felt sense of genuine sufficiency that is available, even in material circumstances of genuine modesty. The person who inhabits this frequency does not possess financial freedom yet, and is not pretending to. They genuinely experience the specific quality of inner abundance that does not depend on a particular number in a bank account for its existence. And from that genuine inner experience, the corresponding outer conditions gradually, but reliably, reorganize. The reason this teaching is rare is not because it is obscure or hidden. It is because it is genuinely difficult to receive. The person who is experiencing genuine financial pressure has every reason to focus on the outer material conditions of that pressure. The urgency is real. The need is real. The gap between what is and what is needed is real. Asking someone in genuine material distress to shift their focus from the outer lack to an inner quality of abundance can sound like a cruel joke, or at best a spiritual bypassing that refuses to take material reality seriously. The teaching is not asking anyone to pretend that real need does not exist. It is asking something considerably more subtle and considerably more demanding. To recognize that the frequency being broadcast in genuine need, the frequency of urgent, desperate wanting, is the specific frequency least likely to attract the corresponding outer change, and to find, within the genuine reality of the difficult circumstance, some genuine small seed of genuine appreciation that can serve as the beginning of a different broadcast. In the 13th century, a Sufi teacher named Ibn Arabi described what he called the alchemy of happiness. The alchemy was not a metaphor for financial transformation, though it can be applied there. It was a description of the specific process through which the inner quality of the human being is transformed from the leaden heaviness of the wanting self into the golden lightness of the fully realized self. Ibn Arabi taught that this transformation, like physical alchemy, did not happen through the addition of anything external, but through the purification and transformation of what was already present. The gold was always in the lead. The abundance was always in the being. The transformation consisted of removing the impurities, the fear, the lack consciousness, the specific contractions of the wanting self that were preventing the natural quality from expressing itself. Protecting your energy in the context of wealth, consciousness means something specific and practical. It means not allowing the prevailing cultural narrative of scarcity, competition, and zero-sum thinking to establish itself as the primary operating frequency of your inner life. The cultural narrative is powerful and pervasive. It is reinforced by news, by most financial education, by the comparison dynamics of social media, and by the ordinary conversations that people have about money, which are almost always organized around lack, rather than around genuine appreciation and genuine possibility. Every time you sit inside that narrative and allow it to settle into your frequency, you are broadcasting the corresponding signal into the universe that responds to frequency. The practice of frequency protection is not naive optimism. It is the specific, disciplined refusal to allow the dominant cultural story about scarcity to become your personal frequency. The practical cultivation of genuine abundance, frequency, begins with the specific daily practice of genuine gratitude applied with precision, not the generic gratitude of telling yourself you are grateful. The specific identification of 3 to 5 genuinely appreciated specific things in the current reality of your life, held with enough genuine attention and genuine felt quality that they actually produce a shift in the inner weather of the moment. This practice is not about denying what is difficult or absent. It is about actively exercising the inner capacity for genuine appreciation, which, like any capacity, develops through genuine use. The person who has practiced this daily for 6 months has a measurably different baseline frequency than the person who has not. Not because they have thought more positive thoughts, but because they have genuinely exercised a specific inner capacity that directly governs the quality of their energetic broadcast. Wealth, understood as frequency, is not the exclusive province of any particular personality type, any particular background, or any particular level of conventional intelligence. It is available to anyone who is willing to do the specific work of genuine inner transformation that this audiobook describes. The outer conditions of material abundance will organize themselves around the inner frequency with the same faithfulness that every other outer condition organizes itself around the inner world that it reflects. This is the teaching that most wealth education misses. And this is why so many people who understand financial mechanics perfectly well and apply them diligently still find themselves circling the same financial patterns, regardless of the effort applied. Chapter 7. Time is not what you think it is. The ordinary experience of time, the sense that it flows steadily from past through present into future, that it is the medium through which events unfold in sequence, and that you are located in a specific position within that flow, called now, is so fundamental to ordinary human experience that questioning it feels almost absurd. And yet, every major contemplative tradition, every deep mystical experience, and increasingly the findings of theoretical physics suggest that this ordinary experience of time, convincing as it is not the final word on what time actually is or how it actually functions. The teachings of the source law that this chapter addresses involve a specific relationship to time that, once genuinely understood, changes not the outer facts of your situation, but the inner quality from which you engage with those facts in ways that turn out to matter enormously for how those facts unfold. The physicist Julian Barber, in his work on the nature of time in quantum cosmology, developed a framework he called the timeless physics, in which time, as we ordinarily experience it, is not a fundamental feature of the universe, but an emergent property of specific relationships between states of the universe. The deeper quantum picture, he argues, contains no flowing time, but only a vast space of possible configurations of the universe, each of which is complete in itself, none of which is more or less past or future in any absolute sense. The experience of time flowing is, in this framework, something that arises within consciousness as it moves through these configurations in a specific order. The implications of this for the question of human potential and human possibility are considerable, though Barber himself does not generally draw them. If time is not a fundamental constraint, but an emergent experience, the specific ways in which we use the experience of time to limit ourselves deserve genuine examination. The contemplative traditions arrived at similar conclusions through a different path. The Vedic concept of the eternal now, the Buddhist teaching on the illusory nature of past and future as anything other than present thoughts, the Christian mystical teaching of the eternal moment in which the divine lives and into which the genuine mystic enters through prayer, the Sufi understanding of the moment as the place where the divine and the human touch, all of these describe a relationship to time in which the ordinary sequential experience is recognized as a specific mode of consciousness rather than an objective feature of reality. And in that recognition, something becomes available that the sequential time-bound mode of consciousness makes invisible. The specific quality of presence in which the future is not merely uncertain, but genuinely open, in which the past is not a chain of causes inevitably determining effects, but a story that can be re-understood in light of genuine transformation, and in which the present moment is not a fleeting instant, but the only actual location of genuine life. The relationship between the source law and time shows up most directly in the specific trap that the sequential time mind creates around the question of change. The sequential time mind says that change takes time, that transformation is a process that unfolds across a long stretch of sequential moments, and that the person who begins genuine inner work today can expect to see genuine outer results someday in a future that may or may not actually arrive. This framing, while not entirely false, carries a hidden assumption that genuine change must be gradual and sequential. The mystical traditions consistently describe a different possibility: the moment of genuine recognition, the instant in which the deeper truth is not merely understood but directly known, produces a shift that doesn't require sequential unfolding to become real. The shift is immediate. The integration of the shift into the ordinary patterns of behavior and perception may take time, but the shift itself happens in the present moment, or not at all. The practical teaching this contains for someone working with the source law is the specific instruction to bring the fullness of genuine engagement to the present moment, rather than treating the present moment as a preparation for a future moment in which life will finally begin to become what you actually want it to be. This is one of the subtler and more pervasive traps that the spiritual path contains. The seeker who is always preparing, always becoming, always in process, always investing in a future version of themselves that will finally be ready, is using the spiritual practice as a more sophisticated form of the same avoidance that the practice is meant to address. The genuine path does not lead from this moment to a better moment. It leads more deeply into this moment, until this moment is recognized as the only moment there has ever been or ever will be. And the life genuinely lived from that recognition is the life that the seeker was always looking for. The secret of what some traditions call sacred time is the specific recognition that the quality of any given moment depends entirely on the quality of presence brought to it. The same external circumstances experienced with genuine full presence feel fundamentally different than the same circumstances experienced while the mind is elsewhere, calculating, worrying, comparing, planning. The person genuinely present to the beauty of an ordinary sunset is not having a lesser experience than the person genuinely present to the beauty of a magnificent painting in a famous museum. The quality of presence is the same. The quality of experience is correspondingly the same. This is not merely a psychological observation. The contemplative traditions that refined this understanding across centuries of careful attention to inner experience found that genuine quality of presence literally transforms the experience of a moment into something that contains, within its ordinary appearance, the specific quality of the sacred. Keeping your mouth shut about this understanding of time is particularly important for a specific reason. The moment you begin explaining to someone else that time is not what they think it is, you have immediately entered the abstract, conceptual space of philosophical discussion, which is precisely the space that is furthest from the immediate, lived, direct recognition this chapter's aimed at. The teaching is not a philosophy about time. It is an invitation to the experience of genuine presence, which does not require any understanding about the nature of time at all, and is in fact somewhat impeded by thinking extensively about time while trying to be present within it. The understanding is the scaffolding that might help you climb to where the genuine experience becomes accessible. Once there, the scaffolding is no longer the thing that matters. Living from the present moment, which is the specific practical upshot of everything this chapter has described, does not require any philosophical conversion to a particular view of the nature of time. It requires the much simpler and much more demanding practice of noticing when you are genuinely here and when you are genuinely elsewhere, and of making the specific small choice again and again across the ordinary hours of the ordinary day to return from elsewhere to here. That practice, sustained with patience and without self-judgment about the frequency of departure, gradually builds the capacity for genuine present moment living that is the specific foundation from which the source law operates most powerfully. Chapter 8. Protecting the Field, Energy Boundaries as Sacred Practice. The concept of energy protection, sometimes dismissed as New Age superstition, disconnected from genuine spiritual tradition, has roots in virtually every serious contemplative and healing tradition in human history. The indigenous healer who speaks of protecting themselves before working with sick patients, the Tibetan Buddhist practitioner who visualizes specific protective forms before entering states of deep meditation, the Christian mystic who prays for protection before engaging with troubled souls, the Sufi teacher who instructs students to cleanse their inner field after difficult interactions. All of these are pointing toward the same genuine phenomenon from the same general direction. The human electromagnetic and energetic field is permeable. What surrounds us enters us. What we expose ourselves to influences what we broadcast. And the person who is genuinely engaged in the work of cultivating the specific frequency of genuine alignment has a compelling reason to protect that cultivation from influences that would consistently push it in a different direction. The most direct form of energy that enters and influences the human field is the energy of other people's dominant states. Research on emotional contagion has established with reasonable precision that the emotional states of people in close proximity transfer to each other through multiple channels simultaneously, including direct physical communication, subtle behavioral signals, and the electromagnetic fields generated by the heart that have been described in earlier chapters. When you spend extended time with someone whose dominant frequency is chronic anxiety, you will tend to absorb some of that frequency into your own field, regardless of your intention or your awareness of the process. When you spend extended time with someone whose dominant frequency is genuine joy and genuine openness, you will tend to absorb some of that frequency as well. This is not something that happens to spiritually undeveloped people, but not to the more advanced. It is a feature of the human system, as it actually operates. The teaching to keep your mouth shut has a direct application in the domain of energy protection. The specific situations in which energy is most reliably dissipated through speech are the situations in which you share a genuine emerging transformation with someone who is not in a position to receive it generously. This is not a judgment on the other person. Most people, when they encounter someone who is undergoing genuine inner transformation, respond in ways that are shaped by their own unconscious needs and their own unexamined beliefs about what is possible. Some respond with genuine encouragement. Others respond with subtle or not so subtle skepticism that feels like realistic concern, but functions as a specific kind of energetic deflation. Still others respond with a quality of competitive comparison that is equally deflating. None of these responses are malicious. All of them can be significantly costly to the specific energy that a genuine transformation requires in its early stages. In ancient Persia, the mystic poet Hafez wrote about what he called the company of the friends, the specific quality of companionship that was not merely social connection, but a shared orientation toward the divine. Hafez taught that the quality of your companions was the single most reliable predictor of the direction of your inner life, because the field you live within most continuously is the field generated by the people you spend the most time with. This teaching has been echoed across contemplative traditions so consistently that it carries the weight of genuine accumulated wisdom rather than mere cultural opinion. The specific phrase used in Christian monastic tradition, "bad company corrupts good character," is not a moral judgment, but an energetic observation. The field is contagious. Choose accordingly. Practical energy protection does not require dramatic withdrawal from social life or the cultivation of an elite spiritual coterie of like-minded seekers. It requires something simpler and in some ways more challenging: the development of genuine inner stability that is not primarily dependent on outer circumstances remaining favorable for its maintenance. This inner stability is what the contemplative traditions call equanimity, and it functions as the most reliable form of energy protection available because it does not attempt to control what enters the field, but maintains the quality of the field regardless of what enters it. The person with genuine equanimity is not deflated by encountering deflating energy. They are not destabilized by encountering destabilizing circumstances. They move through the full variety of human experience while maintaining access to the specific quality of genuine inner-centeredness that is the foundation of their own frequency. The practice of what several traditions call cleansing, the deliberate restoration of inner clarity, after encounters that have genuinely influenced the field in directions away from genuine alignment, is one of the most practical and most immediately accessible energy protection tools available. The form this practice takes varies enormously across different traditions and different individuals. For some, it is the deliberate return to genuine breath awareness, a few minutes of genuine attention to the natural rhythm of breathing that allows the inner field to settle back toward its natural state. For others, it is brief, genuine contact with natural environments, which have long been recognized across healing traditions as having a specific restorative quality on the human electromagnetic field. For still others, it is the specific practice of genuine gratitude, which has been described in earlier chapters as a reliable means of returning the heart's electromagnetic field to coherent patterns after periods of incoherence. The specific forms of mental content that most reliably disturb the field are worth naming, not to create anxiety about thinking certain kinds of thoughts, but to support the development of the specific inner awareness that makes genuine protection possible. Chronic comparison, the habitual assessment of your position relative to others in terms of who has more or less of what is considered valuable, consistently generates the specific frequency of inadequacy that undermines genuine abundance frequency. Chronic resentment, the sustained rehearsal of past wrongs and the specific energy of unforgiven grievance, consistently generates the specific frequency of contracted hostility that undermines genuine connection frequency. Chronic worry, the anxious forward projection into imagined future difficulties, consistently generates the specific frequency of anticipated threat that undermines genuine peace frequency. These are not moral failures. They are habitual patterns with specific energetic consequences, and recognizing them as such is the beginning of the genuine inner work of releasing them. The sacred practice of protecting your energetic field is ultimately the practice of treating the quality of your inner life as genuinely important, genuinely worth careful attention, and genuinely worth protecting from the specific influences that consistently undermine it. This is not selfishness. It is the recognition that the quality of what you bring to every encounter, every relationship, every creative endeavor, and every moment of your life is directly determined by the quality of the inner field from which you bring it. Protecting that field is not a withdrawal from engagement. It is the specific investment that makes genuine engagement genuinely possible. Chapter 9. The Ancient Stories That Carry the Living Law. The oldest human teachings were not philosophical arguments. They were stories. This was not because ancient people lacked the sophistication for abstract thought. The Vedic tradition produced abstract philosophical systems of extraordinary precision. The ancient Greeks gave us logic and systematic metaphysics. The early Chinese thinkers developed rigorous ethical and political philosophy. But the deepest teachings in all of these traditions were also preserved in stories, because stories do something that systematic philosophy cannot. They carry a teaching into the listener at a level below the critical, analytical mind, creating the specific opening through which the teaching can enter and take root before the mind has had the chance to evaluate and categorize and file it away as already known. The stories of the great traditions are not illustrations of principles already stated more precisely elsewhere. In many cases, the story is the most precise available statement of the principle, because precision here is not a matter of logical clarity, but of experiential depth. There is a story told in various forms across several contemplative traditions about a king who became convinced that his kingdom contained a stone of extraordinary power. The stone, according to the legend, could grant whatever the person holding it most genuinely desired. The king sent his wisest advisors across the kingdom to search for it. Years passed. Advisors returned with many stones, all of which were examined and found to be ordinary. Eventually, an old woman from the simplest village in the kingdom asked to speak to the king. She came to the palace bearing no stone. She carried only herself. She told the king that the stone he was searching for could not be found because it could not be lost. It was not anywhere in his kingdom because it was everywhere in his kingdom, and nowhere in his kingdom that could be distinguished from everywhere else. The king did not understand. The old woman said the stone is what looks through your eyes right now, searching for itself. The king sat with this for a very long time. When he finally understood what she meant, he gave away all his wealth, not out of despair, but out of the specific joy of having found what could not be lost. The structure of this story contains the entire teaching of the source law in compressed form. The king, representing the ordinary striving self, spends years and resources searching for an external object that he believes will give him what he most genuinely wants. The advisors, representing the various strategies and techniques of ordinary self-improvement, return with many promising candidates that turn out to be ordinary. The old woman, representing the wisdom that is not impressive by conventional standards, but that carries genuine understanding, redirects the search entirely. The stone is what looks. The seeker is what is being sought. And the recognition of this, when it genuinely arrives, transforms not the outer conditions of the king's life, but his relationship to those conditions, in ways that prove more genuinely liberating than any external stone could have been. The stories of the Japanese Zen tradition, the koans, operate through an even more radical version of this mechanism. A koan is not a riddle that has a clever answer. It is a specifically designed form of language that is intended to break the ordinary mind's analytical machinery by presenting it with something it genuinely cannot process through its normal means. What is the sound of one hand clapping? What was your face before your parents were born? What is the Buddha? These questions do not have answers in the ordinary sense, and spending time trying to find answers in the ordinary analytical way is not the practice, though it is what most beginners initially do. The practice is to hold the question with enough genuine, sustained attention that the analytical mind eventually exhausts itself trying to answer the unanswerable, and in that exhaustion, something else briefly becomes available. The stories of the Zen tradition are the records of what that something else produced when it appeared. The stories from the African Ubuntu tradition carry the source law in the language of the radical interdependence of all beings. Ubuntu, usually translated as I am because we are, is not merely a social philosophy about the importance of community. It is an ontological claim about the nature of the self. The Ubuntu understanding holds that the individual self is not a prior entity that then enters into relationship with other selves. The self is constituted by its relationships. There is no I prior to the we. The person who genuinely understands this cannot experience their own flourishing as separate from or in competition with the flourishing of those around them. Their frequency is constitutively relational. Their abundance, in the deepest sense, is a quality of the field they inhabit and contribute to, rather than a possession they accumulate. This understanding, embodied in the daily practice of Ubuntu communities, is one of the most radical and most practically demanding expressions of the source law available in any cultural tradition. Modern seekers sometimes resist the use of stories from ancient traditions, on the grounds that those traditions come from contexts so different from our own that their applicability is questionable. This resistance, while understandable, misunderstands what the stories are actually doing. They are not primarily sociological documents describing specific historical circumstances. They are maps of the inner life drawn by people who explored the inner territory with extraordinary care and extraordinary depth in circumstances that were outwardly different from ours, but inwardly recognizable across every difference: the fear, the desire, the confusion, the search, the glimpse, the resistance, the gradual deepening, the occasional sudden clarity. These are not historically specific experiences. They are the specific topography of the human inner journey, regardless of when and where it is undertaken. Telling the stories in the specific context of genuine understanding, rather than as clever illustrations of already stated points, is itself a form of spiritual practice. The person who tells a genuine story from genuine inner alignment with what the story is pointing toward is not conveying information. They are creating a specific kind of field in which what the story points toward becomes more available to the listener. This is what Rumi was doing in the garden at twilight. This is what the masters of oral tradition across every culture were doing when they gathered people around fires, or in village squares, or in the inner chambers of temples. The story was the medium. The frequency of genuine understanding carried in the telling was the message. And what the listener received, when they received it fully, was not the story, but the understanding that the story was carrying. Chapter 10. Living in alignment with the Source. Alignment with the Source is not a state achieved and then maintained effortlessly from a permanent plateau of spiritual development. It is a practice, renewed in each moment, requiring the specific quality of honest, humble, continuous attention to the actual quality of one's inner life, rather than to the idealized version of that inner life that the wanting self prefers to maintain. The person who thinks they have arrived at permanent alignment and no longer needs to pay attention to the quality of their inner state has confused a genuine insight about their fundamental nature with a license to stop practicing. The fundamental nature is always aligned. The personality, the habits, the reactive patterns, the specific emotional contractions of the ordinary self require continuous gentle tending if they are to remain genuinely available as vehicles for that fundamental alignment, rather than gradually drifting back toward the contracted, wanting dominated mode that is their default without genuine practice. The Sufi tradition describes the path of alignment in terms of what it calls the stations and the states. The stations are stable inner qualities that, once genuinely cultivated through sustained practice, become permanent features of the practitioner's inner landscape. Patience, gratitude, trust, genuine love, genuine surrender. The states are temporary visitations of specific qualities of consciousness, glimpses of something deeper or higher or more complete that arrive unexpectedly and depart without notice. The traditional teaching is that the states come and go without the practitioner's control, but the stations can be cultivated and maintained through genuine practice. Living in alignment with the Source means, in this framework, developing the specific stations that make genuine alignment possible as a stable feature of one's inner life, rather than depending on the arrival of specific states that cannot be commanded. The specific stations most foundational to genuine alignment with the Source law are worth naming explicitly and examining in their practical dimensions. The first is genuine honesty, not primarily honesty with other people about external facts, but the specific quality of ruthless, non-defensive honesty with oneself about the actual quality of one's inner state at any given moment. The person who can't see their own fear, while it is operating, cannot do anything about it. The person who cannot recognize their own contracted wanting self in action, while it is driving behavior, cannot redirect it. Genuine honesty, in this context, means the willingness to see what is actually there, rather than what is preferred to be there, and to see it without the additional layer of judgment or shame that would make the seeing too painful to sustain. The second foundational station is genuine humility, which in the mystical traditions means something considerably different from social modesty or the the performance of self-deprecation. Genuine humility is the specific recognition that the separate self, the self that believes it is the author of its own thoughts and the agent of its own transformation, is not as solid or as independent as it appears. It is a temporary formation within a field of awareness that is considerably larger and considerably more interesting than the formation itself. This recognition does not diminish the person who has it. It frees them from the specific exhaustion of having to maintain the pretense that the contracted self is in charge of everything and responsible for everything and must succeed at everything through its own limited resources alone. The third foundational station is genuine trust, which is the station that the teaching of surrender, described in Chapter 3, points toward. Genuine trust, in the context of the source law, means the specific confidence that the universe, understood as the intelligent field that responds to frequency with the faithfulness of a perfect mirror, is not organized against you and does not require your anxious management to maintain its operation. The universe was operating before you arrived. It has been operating through you since you arrived, and it will continue its operation regardless of whether you trust it. But the specific quality of your experience within that operation, and the specific quality of what the operation delivers to you through the mechanisms described throughout this audiobook, is significantly shaped by whether you habitually inhabit the frequency of trust or the frequency of anxious management. Practices of alignment are as varied as the people who undertake them. For some, the primary practice is formal meditation. For others, it is the practice of genuine service, the specific quality of full genuine engagement with the needs of others that requires and develops the specific inner qualities of genuine presence, genuine care, and genuine release of the ego's agenda. For others, it is the practice of deep engagement with natural beauty, which has a specific and well-documented capacity to interrupt the ordinary contracted self's activity and create the specific quality of openness that genuine alignment requires. For others, it is the practice of creative expression at the deepest level of genuine authenticity. The specific form of the practice matters less than the specific quality of genuine engagement that the practice produces. Any practice that genuinely cultivates genuine presence, genuine surrender, genuine honesty, and genuine trust is a practice of alignment with the Source. The integration of genuine alignment practice into ordinary daily life is not a matter of finding large blocks of time for formal spiritual practice, though formal practice has its place and its specific value. It is a matter of bringing the quality of genuine presence and genuine alignment into the specific activities of ordinary daily existence. The meeting at work engaged with genuine full presence, rather than with the distracted half-presence of someone whose mind is already at the next meeting. The conversation with a friend, held with genuine care and genuine listening rather than with the performative listening of someone who is waiting to speak. The meal eaten with genuine attention to its specific taste and texture, and the genuine pleasure of nourishment rather than consumed mechanically while reading the news. Each of these small moments of genuine alignment is the source law operating in the specific medium of ordinary life. The person who lives in genuine alignment with the Source, even partially and imperfectly, as all genuine practitioners do, gradually notices a specific quality shift in the texture of daily experience that is distinct from any particular outer achievement or outer improvement. A specific quality of ease begins to replace what was previously chronic strain. A specific quality of genuine presence begins to replace the habitual elsewhere-ness of the ordinary mind. And a specific quality of genuine trust begins to replace the exhausting vigilance of the self that believed it had to manage everything, or everything would go wrong. This quality shift is the source law operating through the practitioner's genuine alignment, and it is the most honest and the most reliable available evidence that the practice is reaching the level where genuine transformation becomes possible. Chapter 11. The Practice of Sacred Silence in Daily Life. The practice of sacred silence is not the practice of never speaking. The great mystics who described silence as the primary language of the divine were not recommending that their students take permanent vows of speechlessness. They were describing a specific quality of inner relationship to speech and to the mind's continuous generation of internal commentary, a quality in which silence is the ground, and speech arises from it rather than the other way around. Most people's relationship to silence and speech is the reverse. Speech and internal commentary are the constant, uninterrupted background, and silence, when it appears at all, appears as an accidental gap between utterances. The practice of sacred silence reverses this relationship, not by eliminating speech, but by cultivating the specific quality of genuine inner stillness from which speech, when it arises, emerges with a specific quality of genuine meaning rather than habitual filler. The Quaker tradition, which has developed one of the most sophisticated contemporary practices of gathered silence, describes what it calls the gathered meeting as a specific quality of collective inner stillness in which something becomes possible that individual silence alone cannot produce. When a group of people come together with the shared intention of genuine inner silence and genuine receptivity, the collective field that emerges has qualities that the sum of the individual fields does not predict. This is the same phenomenon described by Rumi's circle of companions, by the traditional Native American council that begins with extended shared silence, and by the Zen Sangha sitting together in genuine zazen. The gathered silence is not merely the absence of collective speech. It is the presence of a specific collective quality of open receptivity that has been consistently described across traditions as the specific condition in which the deepest teachings become available. The daily practice of sacred silence begins with the smallest available moments of genuine inner stillness rather than with extended formal meditation sessions, which many people find difficult to establish and maintain as consistent practice. The specific practice is this: several times throughout each day, create a moment, however brief, of genuine pause. Not a pause in which you are mentally racing ahead to the next activity while your body is briefly still. A genuine pause in which the forward momentum of the ordinary mind's activity actually stops, however briefly, and the specific quality of genuine present moment openness is genuinely accessed. The breath is the most reliable gateway to this quality. 3 genuine conscious breaths, genuinely attended to from beginning to end, are sufficient to create the specific quality of inner pause that constitutes a genuine moment of sacred silence. The teaching to keep your mouth shut applies to these moments of sacred silence in a specific and practical way. The temptation, upon emerging from even a brief moment of genuine inner stillness, is to immediately speak about it, to describe what was experienced, to share the specific quality of whatever arose. The tradition's instruction is not to do this. The fragile quality of genuine inner stillness is easily dissolved by the act of immediately translating it into speech. The speech reaches for the stability of language, which operates in the sequential analytical mind, and in doing so it pulls the person back from the quality of non-sequential direct experience that the stillness was making available. The practice is to remain in the quality for as long as genuinely possible before allowing the transition back to ordinary speech and activity, and to allow what was genuinely received to integrate through that quality of quiet holding rather than immediate articulation. The specific outer circumstances most conducive to the practice of sacred silence are worth identifying practically, because while the practice can ultimately be maintained regardless of outer circumstances, beginners and intermediate practitioners find that certain conditions genuinely support the cultivation, and others genuinely undermine it. Natural settings, particularly those involving the specific qualities of genuine natural beauty and the specific absence of the relentless stimulus of the human-built environment, have been recognized across healing and contemplative traditions as powerfully supportive of genuine inner stillness. Darkness and the specific quality of night consciousness, which many traditions have recognized as having unique qualities for inner work, support a different and sometimes deeper quality of silence than daylight awareness. The early morning hours, before the demands of the day have established their full momentum, carry a specific natural quality of inner openness that experienced practitioners across traditions have consistently identified as among the most valuable for genuine silent practice. The relationship between sacred silence and the specific teaching about keeping your mouth shut extends beyond the personal practice into the social dimension of the spiritual path. The person who has had a genuine awakening experience, who has touched the quality of genuine direct knowing that this audiobook has been describing from multiple angles, faces a specific temptation that the traditions consistently warn against: the temptation to immediately begin teaching others, to share the fresh received understanding widely, to become an enthusiastic ambassador for what has just been discovered. The warning is not against sharing genuine understanding with others. It is against the premature sharing that is actually serving the ego's desire for significance, more than it is serving the genuine needs of those with whom the sharing occurs. The genuine teacher waits until the understanding has genuinely settled, genuinely integrated, genuinely become a feature of how they live, rather than an exciting new idea they are eager to discuss. The specific practice of maintaining genuine inner silence in the presence of people who are speaking in ways that the ordinary self finds irritating, challenging, or simply wrong is one of the most advanced and most practically valuable applications of the sacred silence teaching. The impulse to correct, to argue, to defend, to respond immediately to every provocation with the appropriate counterposition is one of the most reliable indicators that the ordinary contracted self is fully in charge of the inner field. The specific practice of meeting the impulse with genuine inner silence, not suppressing it with effort, but allowing it to arise and pass without expression, and remaining genuinely present in the silence beneath the impulse, is the practice of a different quality of response that arises from a genuinely different inner position than the reactive, contracted self. Sacred silence, practiced consistently across the ordinary texture of daily life, gradually produces what the contemplative traditions consistently describe as a specific quality of inner spaciousness. Things that previously crowded the inner life, the habitual worries, the chronic comparisons, the persistent rehearsal of past grievances, and future anxieties, begin to occupy less of the available inner space as the silence becomes more reliably accessible. This does not mean that thoughts cease or that emotions stop arising. It means that thoughts and emotions arise within a field that is now large enough to hold them without being contracted or overwhelmed by them. That spaciousness is not an achievement. It is the specific natural quality of the inner life that the practice of sacred silence gradually uncovers by removing what was obscuring it. Chapter 12. The Final Revelation. You are the law. Everything this audiobook has offered across its 11 preceding chapters has been building toward a single recognition that cannot be argued into existence, but can only be revealed by the specific combination of genuine understanding and genuine inner readiness that the chapters have been working to create. The recognition is this: you are not someone who is subject to the source law. You are not someone who is trying to align with the source law. You are not even someone who has discovered the source law and is now applying it. You are the source law itself, expressing itself through the specific form of your particular life, in the specific circumstances of your particular moment, with the specific qualities of awareness and creative capacity that your particular developmental journey has produced. The law is not something you encounter from the outside. It is what you are from the inside. And the entire arc of genuine spiritual development is the arc of recognizing this with increasing depth, increasing completeness, and increasing freedom from the specific illusion of the separate self that has been the primary obstruction to this recognition. This is the revelation that the old teacher in the story at the beginning of this audiobook was pointing toward when she told the king that what he was searching for could not be lost because it was the very thing doing the searching. This is what Eckhart meant by the ground of the soul. This is what the Sufi tradition means by fana, the dissolution of the self-sense into the awareness that the self was never separate from. This is what the Zen tradition means by seeing one's own original face. This is what the Vedantic tradition means by the recognition of the identity of Atman and Brahman, the individual awareness, and the universal awareness recognized as never having been actually different. Each of these formulations is culturally specific. The recognition they are pointing toward is universal. The specific reason this is called a revelation, rather than an achievement, is precise and important. The recognition that you are the source law does not come through attaining something you did not have. It comes through genuinely releasing the specific conviction that you are something other than what you have always actually been. The separate self, the self that experiences itself as apart from life, and therefore needing to strive against it, manage it, negotiate with it, and occasionally be victimized by it, is the specific illusion that blocks through recognition. It is not a punishment. It is not a design flaw. It is the specific condition that makes individual experience possible, the specific lens through which universal awareness experiences itself as a particular someone in a particular place, in a particular moment. The illusion serves a purpose. The suffering it generates is not random. It is the specific suffering that motivates the search for its resolution. And the resolution, when it arrives, is not the elimination of individual experience, but the deepening of it into the recognition of its own ultimate nature. The practical life of someone who has begun to genuinely receive this recognition, even partially and imperfectly, as all genuine recognition initially arrives, changes not in its outer content but in its inner quality. The same activities, the same relationships, the same challenges and the same beauties of the ordinary world appear within a genuinely different light. The activities are no longer merely means to ends. They are complete in themselves, each one carrying the full weight of the only moment there is. The relationships are no longer primarily arenas of mutual need, satisfaction. They are the specific places where the universal awareness recognizes itself through the specific meeting of two apparently separate expressions. The challenges are no longer primarily threats to be managed. They are the specific forms that the source law takes in generating the exact conditions most required for the next stage of the specific individual's development. Keeping your mouth shut about this recognition is not a prohibition against sharing genuine insight. It is wisdom about the specific conditions under which the most important recognitions can genuinely travel from one person to another. The recognition that you are the source law cannot be transmitted as a piece of information because it is not a piece of information. Every attempt to convey it in ordinary discursive speech produces something that sounds like either grandiosity or paradox, neither of which opens the receiving person toward the direct experience the words are attempting to convey. What does travel, when the conditions are right, is the specific quality of the field generated by someone who has genuinely received the recognition and lives from it. The presence of such a person in a room changes the room, changes the presence of such a person in a relationship changes the relationship. Not because of what they say or do, but because of what they are, which is precisely what the source law has always said life responds to. The person who has genuinely received even a glimpse of this recognition becomes, without necessarily intending to, a specific kind of force in the lives of the people around them. Not through advice or instruction or the deliberate effort to help. Through the specific quality of genuine presence that the recognition produces. The genuine presence of someone who knows, even briefly and imperfectly, that they are not separate from the life they are living, is the most powerfully healing and most powerfully transformative thing one human being can offer another. This is what the masters of every tradition were actually offering. Not their teachings, which were the packaging, the specific quality of their being, which was the content. The divine spark that was invoked at the beginning of this audiobook is not something separate from what you are that needs to be discovered in you. It is what you are, seen clearly. It is the awareness that is aware of reading these words right now. It is the specific quality of conscious presence that has been here through every chapter of this audiobook, through every experience of your life, through every version of yourself that you have been across the years of your living. It has never been absent. It cannot be lost. The entire journey, every teaching received, every practice undertaken, every moment of genuine silence cultivated, has been the journey of the source law recognizing itself through the specific, beautiful, peculiar form of your particular life. This is where the audiobook ends and the practice begins. Not the practice of applying what has been learned, though that will come. The practice of living into the recognition that the learning was pointing toward in each moment of the ordinary days ahead, with all the patience and all the humor and all the genuine compassion for your own inevitable forgetting and returning, and forgetting and returning that genuine practice requires. The secret you have been given across these 12 chapters is not a secret you keep by not telling. It is a secret you keep by living it so fully that words become genuinely unnecessary. That life, quietly and radiantly lived, will do more for the people around you than any number of teachings ever could. The mouth that is genuinely full of genuine being has no need to open.